Israel says it gives adequate notice before bombing an area, but the number of civilian casualties is still mounting. Palestinians have been ordered to evacuate countless times since October the 7th. First, they were told to leave their homes in the north and go south of Wadi Gaza. Many moved to Khan Younis in the south. Then the Israeli army issued evacuation orders for parts of Khan Younis as it intensified strikes and ground operations there. But it only gives people a few hours' notice. Roads have been destroyed and bombing, it doesn't stop, meaning moving anywhere is extremely difficult and dangerous. The UN says 1.9 million Palestinians, more than 80% of the population, have been forced from their homes, either by Israeli attacks or Israeli evacuation orders. Meanwhile, some Israelis have expressed a desire to return to settlements in Gaza, which were abandoned nearly 2 decades ago.
In the end, we will have no choice, probably, but to rule there in Gaza. We obviously must rule militarily. We will have to rule, and it could come to that, returning to Gush Katif. It's simply reality will oblige Israel to rule Gaza. There might be such a thing in history. In reality, I'm a believer, yes. God might force it to happen that way. They are not talking about returning to the former settlements in Gaza yet, but this is something that can happen because there might be no choice. The IDF will have to rule there in Gaza. In any case, you can't rule if you don't have settlements there.
I believe we shall return to Gaza. The question is when. I have no idea. I believe we shall return because the Gaza Strip belongs to us. It is part of the boundaries of the Promised Land, so we must return there.
Well, Toby Cadman is an international human rights lawyer. He joins us now from The Hague. Good to have you with us, sir. I want to start by referencing a statement by the United Nations on October the 13th, quoting or referring to a UN expert as, quote, condemning the evacuation order as a crime against humanity and a blatant violation of international humanitarian law. That was back on October the 13th. What is the legality now of these repeated evacuation orders?
Well, thank you. I think we've said since the very beginning that these evacuation orders forcing Gazans to leave their homes with very little notice before their homes are effectively destroyed and larger areas of Gaza being flattened. We've consistently stated that there's no proper legal basis for doing that, and the fact that the Israeli authorities repeatedly say that they give sufficient notice to civilians so that they can leave is still no justification for devastating civilian areas, and it's all the more worrying when we see certainly civilians being moved from one area to another, and then that other area then subsequently being attacked. And I think that the evidence is obviously mounting up for future prosecutions of war crimes because it's being documented in real time. We're seeing statements, we're seeing the conduct and the lack of justification, the lack of proportionality, and the lack of distinction between military and civilian targets.
And coupled with that, when you combine the two elements which you mentioned there, evacuation orders telling people to go to the south, but then the southern areas themselves also falling victim to Israeli strikes, that makes it even more questionable, to put it politely.
Well, yes, I think the term that I've used before on this channel is it's perfidious. So when you're effectively giving civilians a safe passage to an area which is protected, and then that area is then attacked. It's reminiscent of July 1995 in Srebrenica, when safe areas, enclaves were established, and then we saw what the outcome of that was: more than 8,000 men and boys killed. So it is deeply disturbing when we see this time and time again.
Adding another layer to that, of course, we should put it in the context of this is an area that under international law, according to statements, many statements by various UN agencies and officials, this is an occupied territory. It's been under occupation since 1967. It is under siege for 16 years. What is the legality then of going and establishing settlements, which is the talk amongst some right now? There are even Israeli companies talking about building what they call developments in Gaza.
Well, certainly we can go back to the way that the existing settlements and expansion of settlements has been viewed. Certainly, the former prosecutor of the International Criminal Court, Fatou Bensouda, had stated that the establishment of settlements fell within the jurisdiction of the International Criminal Court, and of course, moving a population into an area under occupation is a war crime, and Israel is governed specifically by the Fourth Geneva Convention, which governs occupation. And we've spoken about this repeatedly, how the occupation is unlawful. Moving a population into an occupied area by the occupier is unlawful. Moving those who are under occupation out or into different areas, whether that is internally or externally, is also prohibited. And what we see now is statements coming out from Netanyahu and his government that they are now looking to move Palestinians completely out of Gaza, to occupy it and to establish settlements. It is all unlawful. And again, I hate to sound like a broken record, but if this was happening anywhere else in the world, we wouldn't be having this discussion, having to establish that this is unlawful. Of course it's unlawful. We all know it's unlawful, but it's about time that we actually took some concrete steps to prevent it getting worse.
And on that point, particularly your point of if this was happening anywhere else in the world, as I'm sure you're aware, there's been criticism of the ICC prosecutor and the ICC itself, because we've seen in other scenarios, Ukraine being an example, where there were allegations of war crimes, even in cases where they were not able to send their investigators to the ground, that war crimes investigations had begun and even arrest warrants issued for very powerful people. Why is it fair to say that the ICC has been too slow to move in this case?
I think it's fair to criticize it for being slow to wake up. I think what Karim Khan, the prosecutor, is doing now is trying to move things forward. But we're at the stage, even before October of this year, there has been plenty of time for the ICC to take action.
Toby, does that undermine and politicize, increase the perception of politicization of justice and the ICC?
Well, absolutely. And look, I think we have to accept that there is no conflict more politically charged than the Israel-Palestine conflict. It is the most politicized conflict that we've experienced and we're likely to experience. And so you have to factor that into the equation. But the ICC is an institution that is supposed to be acting independent of politics. And I think we have to take the position now that there is nothing preventing the ICC from moving forward. There's nothing preventing the prosecutor from properly investigating this. And as we say, we're seeing the evidence play out on our screens in real time. There is a sufficient basis, as there was in Ukraine, to issue the arrest warrant for Vladimir Putin. There is a sufficient basis for bringing arrest warrants for both those that committed the atrocities on the 7th of October and those Israeli officials who have continued with the language that they use, the attacks, of flattening Gaza, of establishing settlements. The time has come for there to be concrete action.
All right. Thank you so much, Toby Cadman.